Welcome to part 2 of our shared decision-making learning module. In this part of our module, we are going to discuss how to begin setting the stage for shared decision-making. We have 3 guiding questions that will help us focus the learning of this module. For this portion, we will focus on how we set the stage for effective shared decision-making. In other words, how to plan for it. I want to begin by sharing a quote from Collaborative Leadership: How Citizens and Civic Leaders Make a Difference. Before I do, I just want to say the truth is that it's not easy being the person in charge. And really, one person shouldn't be responsible for making decisions that have such a big impact on so many people. The issues that we are trying to overcome, like increasing educational equity for all students and dismantling oppressive systems, are too big for one person to solve on their own. Our students, families, and community members that are closest to these issues have valuable insight and expertise to share. And that is why collaborative leadership is our ultimate goal and the pillar that drives the success of the rest. It rests on this belief that if you bring the appropriate people together in constructive ways with good information, they will create authentic visions and strategies for addressing the shared concerns of the organization or community. So how do we set the stage for shared decision-making? Elena Aguilar, in her book, The Art of Coaching Teams, describes indicators for effective decision-making. We want to highlight 2 that we feel are important to consider first. First is making sure the right people are present. So your key stakeholders and decision makers. Next is identifying decision-making moments. We are going to discuss these indicators in more depth and give you some time to reflect on them in this portion of our module. If at any time you need to pause or rewind and rewatch part of this video, please feel free to do that. When we talk about making sure the right people are present, we're talking about representatives from your key stakeholder groups, including students, your school staff, teachers, admin, district leaders, parents, families, and caregivers, and community members, community partners, and local business leaders. You also need to consider if the voices of historically underrepresented communities are present in these spaces. Facilitating Power provides really powerful language in their document called The Spectrum of Family and Community Engagement for Educational Equity. They highlight that when families and community members are ignored, as you see on this side of the scale, the impact is marginalization. When we deny access to decision-making processes, we're sending families and communities the message that their voice, needs, and interests don't matter. If you look down the scale and you see as we shift towards involving families, collaborating, and deferring to, take a look at the messages that we're sending. When we ensure students, families, and community needs and assets are integrated into process and informed planning, we're telling them, you're making us think and act in ways that better serve students and families. When we ensure family and community capacity to play a leadership role in implementation of decisions that affect them, we're telling them your expertise and leadership is critical to how we achieve equitable educational achievement. If you want to explore this resource more, we are going to link it at the end of this slide deck. The next thing we need to consider is decision-making moments within our meetings. So typically within a meeting, there are 5 different categories or components that we see. The first is information sharing. This might look like reviewing upcoming events or calendaring, reading data reports, basically just reporting out information. Community building. Or relationship building might look like inclusions or check-ins, icebreakers, reflecting on norms, and it's when you're focusing on building trust and getting to know one another. Learning is when you offer professional development. Planning may look like discussions around upcoming events, rolling out a new initiative, mission and vision identification, etc. And finally, problem solving. Problem solving is when we have conversations that ask participants to identify and resolve issues, usually data-driven. So 5 different components of a meeting. Now, where do you think decision-making happens? When you're information sharing, when you're community building, when you're learning, when you're planning, or when you're problem solving? When do we make decisions? If you're thinking planning and problem solving, you're correct. When you give your colleagues or your teams opportunities to plan and problem solve together, this is when you have the opportunity to allow for shared power and shared decision making. It's not just enough to have stakeholders at the table. Now, as leaders and facilitators of these collaborative meetings, it's important to ensure that there are opportunities in these spaces for collaboration and shared decision-making to occur. This brings us to the end of part 2, and we would like you to pause here to discuss, write, or reflect on these questions. First, think about the current teams or meetings that you've been a part of or that exist at your school site. Are all stakeholder groups, including students, families, community members, community partners, school staff, teachers, and school leaders, represented in these spaces when they should be? If they're not, who's missing? And what steps might need to be taken in order to reach out and increase stakeholder engagement? Next, I want you to consider what happens in these meetings. Do you currently allow the stakeholders that are present time for collective planning and problem solving? If not, where might there be opportunities to increase shared decision making? So if you're reflecting on a team and you're thinking about your meetings and realizing it's a lot of information sharing and not a lot of time to plan and problem solve together, you might consider how might you increase opportunities for collaboration within that team. Feel free to pause the video here, go back and rewatch any portion of the video if needed. And then when you're done reflecting on these questions and take as much time as you need, come back and join us for part 3.